Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the Digitally Digested segment, for comparing the Sony Alpha A7 on the left and the Sony Alpha A7R on the right. These are both full-frame mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras, the lightest and smallest on the market, 24 megapixels on the left, $16.99 for the body alone, kit included, $19.99.99. For the A7R, you're looking at $22.99.99 body alone, no other options, but you can create the kit and simulate the exact same experience, picking up the Carl Zeiss SEL 24-70Z, which is priced at $11.99.99. So a substantial price difference between these two kits, but they inherently will draw comparison because, well, first and foremost, the bodies are really, really similar. The only real difference between the A7 and A7R outside of pricing is specifically to do with the sensor, the megapixel count, as I mentioned before, because each does have a full-frame 35mm sensor. In terms of the megapixel count, whether or not the 24 on the left versus the 36 on the right is going to be a critical deciding factor for each consumer, whether you're just an enthusiast, or it's a matter of, hobby, or you're actually a pro. That's all going to be a, key in how you're going to make your decision. In my opinion, if budget can accommodate the R, it's definitely the better option. The build quality is slightly superior. You've got a little bit more metallics. The base plate, it'll in theory be able to support slightly heavier lenses. That's part of the reason that the Zeiss lens, in my opinion, already out of the box is heavier than the kit lens you're getting with the 7. But that in no way detracts from the build quality of the Alpha A7. It's still one of the best cameras that I've ever used. It's just a matter of the R being able to best it. And that's been where Sony's been going with the R in their designation, not only in CyberShot, but of course now here in the Alpha interchangeable world as well. So when it comes to pricing, in my opinion, I want to say with the A7R pairing, you do get what you pay for because you get incredible quality. But that doesn't mean that in the other sense that because you're paying less for the A7 kit, you aren't getting a great value. And I say that because as I've mentioned in videos in the past covering Sony's other mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras, their kit lenses tend to perform very well, and that's because Sony knows that a lot of people don't ever go beyond the kit glass, and they end up judging a camera's performance by what they get out of the box. And if a kit lens disappoints, well, most consumers don't realize that it's usually a limitation of the glass rather than the body, at least specifically in Sony's offerings. And that applies to both of these, because keep in mind, you can throw on any E-mount lens here and go into a cropped mode, which will give you 10 megapixel APS-C equivalent performance on the A7 and 15 megapixel cropped APS-C shots on the A7R. And that's another reason I prefer the A7R overall, is because if you do have a collection of E-mount glass like myself, it's going to perform or fare better on the R overall than it will with the 7. Still serviceable at 10 megapixels, but overall just not as desirable when you're spending this sort of money, even though both of these cameras are considered budget priced, in my opinion, when compared to most of the full-frame competition, at least that's brand new, because I don't like comparing these cameras to old stuff, and that's what most people do. But again, back to the direct comparison, the performance you're getting out of the A7 on the left is best in class. Autofocus speed, not best in class, 5 frames per second, but that's a half a frame better than the R. That leads me back to why the R, again, is more attractive to me personally. That is not a justifiable enough, at least, improvement in autofocus speed to pull me, for continuous shooting to the 7 over the extra resolution found in the R. On the other hand, this does combine phase as well as contrast detection for autofocus, something that's fairly standard on cameras of this class, and the R forgoes that. The A7R also forgoes the low-pass filter, so the focus here really is all about resolution. no electronic first curtain, which means that when you fire off the shutter on this camera, you're going to get a far greater shutter noise than you will with the A7. In my opinion, if you've watched any of my videos so far, you already know how I feel about this, which is that when it comes to getting the best performance both in still and video that you can in the most compact form, to be critical about the noise of the shutter is trivial at best. And when you look at any of the other full-frame competition, I don't know anything that's silent other than the RX1 and RX1R, which are fixed-lensed CyberShot point-and-shoot cameras, even though they pack full-frame sensors, much like these cameras. In fact, the full-frame sensor in the A7 here is identical to that in the RX1. You do, though, of course, have some key enhancements. Both of these cameras have Wi-Fi, NFC, weatherproofing, the Play Memory Store, where you can buy apps like time-lapse and all sorts of corrective applications that will just enhance your photography to another level that traditionally would require post-processing or third-party equipment, and here it's just built into the camera. But when it comes to the kit performance, again, as I mentioned, both really do perform relative to pricing. The Zeiss glass has that constant f4 aperture. You don't have that here with the A7 kit, but the A7 kit is lighter. It doesn't extend when zooming. In terms of overall performance in daylight, the Zeiss is going to give you, no question, better contrast, better sharpness, but you will be hard-pressed in great lighting to tell these lenses apart when they're in, similar, again, conditions, as well as at shooting at similar specifications. So that's where many people are going to feel that the R is just a complete waste of money, especially when you can, if you really want the Zeiss capability, you can always get it for the 7. But again, from a kit perspective, because that's what these really are. I mean, the Zeiss is the kit lens, no question about it, specifically for the R, whereas, well, we know what this kit lens is. It's paired with the 7 for $2,000. And again, if I had to, if I was a consumer, because that's really who this video is about. I mean, a pro isn't going to try to make this decision. They know what they need. But if I was a general consumer, enthusiast, hobbyist, transitioning from Micro Four Thirds or any mirrorless NEX camera, Alpha, NEX now, or any other manufacturer, I would definitely be going for the A7R, and that's because all the things I've mentioned really still lend themselves to giving the R just the inherent advantage over the 7 in every form. Because even when I think that, the autofocus system is going to be a killer feature for the 7, in reality, the focus speed difference is negligible at best. So it really comes down to whether or not you want that as extra resolution and are willing to actually pay for it. And the same can be said for both of these lenses. It's exactly the same compromise, because really the weight difference as well as size difference and the way they function isn't enough, again, in my opinion, for anyone to decide on either of these lenses. You shouldn't be picking them based on those things. You should be picking them based on their performance and how well you can stomach the price respectively for either, $500 versus $1,200. I mean, is this really worth more than twice the cost of the kit lens? And that's going to, again, depend on your use. For casual use, I believe this is a fantastic, if no less than perfect pairing. Of course, you have to respect the low light limitations. You can see right there the rating of the lens in terms of the aperture range, 3.5 to 5.6. And in terms of the thread, and the number of elements, again, it's not the Zeiss. There's nothing else to be said for it. Here we got a 55 thread. The Zeiss is a 67. And that's to, also the size gain is because it's a faster piece of glass. We've got that constant f4. Zeiss going element heavy in there like they would with any of their designs to really give you an experience and a result that you're not going to get from anyone else's glass. The T-Star coating, the colors, everything just looks fantastic out of this pairing right here. So for me right now, there's no question the A7R Zeiss kit pairing is the way to go over the A7. And while many will again consider this a ridiculous comparison because of the price difference, I know that many consumers, even pros, aren't going to, because this is all again relative to your expectations. If you require that extra resolution, you're not going to be disappointed with what Sony and Zeiss has put together with this lens. So despite early criticism for imperfections that really are inherent in every product out there, electronics aside, right now I have to say this is the better pairing for the person, the pro, the enthusiast, the hobbyist that has to have the best. But for everyone else, those transitioning, as I said, from cameras that weren't full frame, this is going to be a lot for you to grow with right out of the box, and eventually mature to something like the SEL2470Z or even better lenses that Sony will have down the road. But when it comes kit to kit, this A7R Zeiss pairing right now just blows me away and outperforms pretty much everything else that I've ever had. Not in the sense that it literally outperforms, because clearly Canon, Nikon, specifically Canon, you're going to get faster autofocus from both of those manufacturers. But you won't find this form factor. You won't find this balance. And I know for a lot of you out there, this isn't really a compromise, even though, the sticklers will say that both of these are. So for me, this is what I would call the perfect compromise, and it's only going to get better as long as Sony stays focused on DI, which hopefully they will, despite what's going on currently internally. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.